The Westward Dream, America in 1846. In the mid-19th century, America was restless, a young nation bursting with ambition, driven by a fever known as manifest destiny. It was the belief that Americans were destined, even divinely ordained, to expand across the continent, from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The promise of the West shimmered like a mirage. Tales of fertile land, gold, and new beginnings drew thousands of families from the crowded towns of the East toward the wide, untamed frontier. They called it Going West, and it became both a journey and a dream, a test of endurance and hope. By 1846, this dream had become a movement. Wagon trains left from places like Independence and St. Joseph, Missouri, launching points of the Oregon and California trails. Families sold their homes, packed everything they owned into heavy wooden wagons, and began the 2,000-mile trek toward lands they had never seen. Among those drawn by the promise of the West were two brothers, George Donner and Jacob Donner, prosperous farmers from Springfield, Illinois. The Donners and the Reeds. The Donner brothers were in their 60s, older than most pioneers, but both were respected and steady men. George Donner, calm and thoughtful, was elected the captain of their small emigrant group. His wife, Tamsin Donner, was a well-educated, strong-willed schoolteacher who kept a detailed journal of their journey, one that would later become a haunting testament to endurance and tragedy. Traveling with them was another family, the Reeds. James F. Reed, a tall, ambitious man of Irish descent, was a wealthy businessman who dreamed of establishing himself in the fertile valleys of California. His wife, Margaret Reed, shared his vision, and together they brought their 4 children and 2 hired servants. Between the Donners, Reeds, and several other families, a total of 87 emigrants would eventually become known to history as the Donner Party. They were ordinary settlers, carpenters, farmers, teachers, craftsmen, mothers, and children, seeking a better life. None of them could imagine that their names would one day become synonymous with one of the most harrowing survival stories in American history. The Westward Route. The Oregon Trail was already well-trodden by 1846. Emigrant guides and wagon masters offered advice. Leave by late April or May. Follow the Platte River north. Cross the Rockies before the first snow. Timing was everything. Leave too early, and the plains would be barren of grass for the oxen. Leave too late, and the Sierra Nevada mountains would be impassable by snow. On April 12, 1846, the Donner and Reed families departed from Springfield, Illinois. Their wagons were heavily loaded with supplies: flour, bacon, beans, dried fruit, rifles, spare parts, even furniture. James Reed's wagon, nicknamed the Pioneer Palace Car, was luxurious for its time. A 2-story wagon with a built-in stove and bed meant to keep his wife comfortable on the long journey. They joined a larger train of about 500 emigrants heading toward Oregon and California. Spirits were high. The great journey had begun. The road west. The trail west was both beautiful and brutal. In May, the wagons rolled across the Missouri River and into the endless plains of Kansas, vast seas of grass rippling beneath the wind. They followed the Blue River, fording streams and crossing muddy valleys where the oxen strained under the weight of the loads. Days were long and exhausting. The men walked beside the wagons, guiding the teams. Women cooked over open fires. Children gathered buffalo chips to use as fuel. Each morning, the emigrants woke to the sound of horns and the cracking of whips, forming their wagons into a single, creaking line that stretched for miles. The journey was slow, 12 to 15 miles at best. At night, They circled the wagons for protection and camped beneath a vast canopy of stars. Around campfires, they shared laughter, stories, and songs of the homeland they had left behind. It was a journey of both hardship and camaraderie, and for a while, it went smoothly. The letter that changed everything. By late May, they reached the bustling supply town of Independence, Missouri, where travelers restocked for the long push ahead. It was there that James Reed heard of a new, supposedly faster route to California. This route had been advertised in an emigrant guide written by Lansford Hastings, a young explorer and promoter who had never actually traveled the route himself. His book claimed that pioneers could save 300 to 400 miles by cutting through the Wasatch Mountains and across the Great Salt Lake Desert, a supposed shortcut. Reed was intrigued. The promise of a faster journey appealed to his ambition and optimism. He bought a copy of Hastings' Emigrant Guide to Oregon and California, and his enthusiasm began to spread among the travelers. What he didn't know, what no one yet knew, was that the so-called shortcut was nearly impassable for wagons and would lead them straight into deadly terrain. A new company forms. By early June, the Donner and Reed families, along with a few others, decided to form their own smaller party. They wanted to move at their own pace, faster, more independent. The group included George and Jacob Donner with their families, James and Margaret Reed with their children, the Graves family, the Breens, the Murphys, the Eddies, and others. Altogether, they numbered about 32 men, women, and children, with 9 wagons at first. More joined later. They set off along the Platte River toward Fort Laramie, their destination the distant land of California, a land most of them only knew from hearsay and imagination. As they traveled through Nebraska's plains, they met other emigrants, trappers, and army scouts. The journey was hard but hopeful. They encountered buffalo herds that darkened the horizon, crossed rivers swollen from spring rain, and endured dust storms that turned day into haze. At Fort Laramie in July, they rested and repaired wagons. It was there that Reed met a traveler who had just come from the West, a man who warned him that the Hastings Cutoff was treacherous. But by then, pride and confidence had taken root. The Donners and Reeds believed they could handle whatever came their way. Others may fear the unknown, but fortune favors the bold, he reportedly said. They pressed on. Trouble ahead. As summer deepened, the heat rose, and tempers sometimes flared. The long, monotonous days took their toll. Some complained about Reed's leadership and his insistence on taking the new route. Others trusted George Donner's calm authority. But by late July, a letter reached them, carried by a messenger sent by Hastings himself. The message invited all California-bound emigrants to follow his new route through the Wasatch Mountains. He promised, "It is shorter and better in every respect." The decision was made. The Donner Party would take the Hastings Cutoff. It was a moment of fate, one that sealed their destiny. As they turned southward from the well-worn Oregon Trail and headed into uncharted territory, the familiar landmarks disappeared behind them. Ahead lay deserts, mountains, and hardship beyond imagination. None of them knew that this choice, made in hope and ignorance, would lead to starvation, suffering, and death in the frozen Sierra Nevada.